Media fact-checker. Rising national security anxiety among Australians ahead of potential foreign military conflict and crises. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australian National University's National Security College conducted surveys and consultations between November 2024 and February 2026 involving over 20,000 Australians, including 480 interviews, 300 meetings, 8 focus groups, and 100 public submissions. In July 2025, 69% of Australians surveyed considered it likely to almost certain that Australia would be involved in a foreign military conflict within 5 years. By February 2026, 45% of Australians believed a foreign military attack on Australian soil was likely, very likely, or almost certain within 5 years. Concerns about terrorism rose sharply from 55% in November 2024 to 72% in February 2026, following the Bondi beach attack on December 14, 2025. More than 85% of respondents in 2026 believed climate change impacts, AI-enabled attacks, disinformation, foreign interference, economic crises, and supply disruptions were likely by the end of the decade. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states that 55% of 18 to 24-year-olds worried about national security in February 2026, while news.com.au and ABC do not specify the exact percentage for this age group in their headlines or summaries. The Guardian mentions that 43% of respondents deemed a foreign military attack would have major consequences, but this specific breakdown is not repeated in other sources. The Guardian highlights that 36% of respondents regarded a foreign military attack as catastrophic, a detail not explicitly mentioned in other sources. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Queensland police shoot man during knife-related incident in Logan Central. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A man in his 30s was shot by police in Logan Central, Queensland, on Saturday evening around 6 p.m. The incident occurred at Carmody Centre on Ewing Road, near Carmody Street, Logan Central. Police were called due to reports of a man armed with a knife making threats. The man was shot in the abdomen and taken to Princess Alexandra Hospital, where he remains in a stable condition. Police provided first aid before transporting the man to hospital. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the man is 27 years old, while ABC describes him as in his 30s. News Kamau says the incident occurred overnight without a specific time, while ABC clarifies it was at 6 p.m. News Kamau states police allege the man approached them with the weapon during engagement, while ABC says officers attempted to negotiate first. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Democrats impeach Florida AG Pam Bondi over Epstein files briefing refusal. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Democrats walked out of a closed-door briefing with Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi on Jeffrey Epstein files on Wednesday, calling it an outrageous fake hearing. Bondi refused to commit to testifying under oath despite a subpoena voted by the House Oversight Committee earlier this month. 5 Republicans joined Democrats in voting to subpoena Bondi to question the Justice Department's handling of Epstein investigation files. Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche attended the briefing to address bipartisan frustration over the release of Epstein-related documents. California Congressman Robert Garcia called the briefing an outrageous fake hearing after Bondi's refusal to testify under oath. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Bondi accused Democrats of using Epstein documents to distract from Trump's successes, but Article 2 does not mention this specific accusation. Article 1 includes Bondi's defense of the Justice Department's handling of files, while Article 2 focuses more on the Democrats' impeachment push without repeating Bondi's defense. Article 1 mentions Bondi's alleged spying on Congress members, but Article 2 does not reference this claim. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Homicide investigation and manslaughter charge in Perth's Banksia Grove over a woman's death. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 42-year-old woman was found unresponsive at a home in Banksia Grove, Perth's northern suburbs, on Thursday morning around 9 a.m. The woman was declared dead at the scene by paramedics after being unresponsive. The incident occurred on Mayerlee Bend, Banksia Grove. A man in his 40s was assisting police with inquiries, Article 1, and later charged, Article 2. Police received the initial report around 9 a.m. on Thursday. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states a man in his 40s is assisting police, while Article 2 specifies a 47-year-old man was arrested and charged. Article 1 does not mention charges or an arrest, while Article 2 reports a charge of manslaughter and an upcoming court appearance. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-led Middle East conflict escalation and global response over Strait of Hormuz and energy attacks. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. European leaders, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, and Japan issued a joint statement condemning Iran for attacks on commercial shipping vessels and civilian energy facilities in the Strait of Hormuz on 2024 XXXX, exact date not specified. The joint statement called for an immediate comprehensive moratorium on attacks on civilian infrastructure, including oil and gas installations, and expressed readiness to contribute to ensuring safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran retaliated against an Israeli strike on its South Pars natural gas field by attacking a major Qatari liquefied natural gas facility, Ras Laffan, in Qatar, causing 17% of Qatar's LNG export capacity to be eliminated, valued at $20 billion, 28 billion Australian dollars. Brent crude oil prices briefly rose above $119 per barrel on the same day as the attacks. Japanese Prime Minister Sonai Takeichi visited US President Donald Trump at the White House, positioning Japan as a potential coordinator for regional security efforts amid the conflict. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources, as they are nearly identical in content. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Olympian Rohan Dennis' social media post about a Porsche car criticised amid his wife's fatal 2023 crash. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Olympic cyclist Rohan Dennis was given a 17-month suspended prison sentence in May 2024 for an aggravated act likely to cause harm after his wife Melissa Hoskins died in December 2023 when she was struck by his car near their Medindi, Adelaide home. Dennis pleaded guilty to the charge and was placed on a 2-year good behaviour bond with a $100 fine. His driver's licence was suspended for 5 years. Melissa Hoskins, an Olympic and world champion cyclist, died after jumping onto the bonnet of Dennis's Volkswagen Amarok, not the Porsche. During an argument about a kitchen renovation, she was dragged under the car and killed. Dennis posted a photo of a black Porsche on Instagram on December 2024 with the caption "What an absolute weapon." South Australia's Victims' Rights Commissioner Sarah Quick called the Porsche post deeply offensive and said it demonstrated a profound lack of respect for Melissa and her family. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian says Dennis was sentenced in May 2023, but news.com.au and ABC say it was May 2024. The Guardian states Hoskins opened the car door, which Dennis closed without stopping before she fell, while ABC and news.com.au do not mention this detail. The Guardian reports Dennis deleted his entire Instagram account, but ABC only states he posted additional content before, no mention of deletion. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government response to fuel crisis amid Middle East conflict and oil supply disruptions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese is convening a snap meeting of the National Cabinet on Thursday, the 29th of March, 2024, to coordinate a national response to the fuel crisis, with the meeting held virtually from Tasmania. The fuel crisis is linked to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, specifically the US and Israel's preemptive strikes on Iran and the resulting blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which carries about 20% of global oil supply. At least 6 ships destined for Australia have been cancelled due to the conflict in Iran and the Gulf, with around 80 ships expected to arrive in the coming weeks, per Energy Minister Chris Bowen. The Australian government has released nearly 1/5, 20%, of its domestic petrol and diesel reserves to address shortages, particularly in rural and regional areas. The government temporarily relaxed fuel standards to allow higher sulfur levels in fuel, injecting an extra 100 million litres per month into the market for 60 days. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC report that the government plans to introduce legislation to double penalties for fuel companies, but only ABC explicitly states the maximum fine of $100 million per offence. The Guardian and ABC emphasise that the government is taking proactive steps to address the crisis, while the coalition, opposition, repeatedly accuses Labour of being slow to address the crisis and failing to have a plan, ABC. The Guardian and ABC state that the government has released about 6 days' worth of petrol and 5 days of diesel from its emergency stockpile, but News Kamau states the government has released up to 20% of Australia's domestic petrol and diesel reserves without specifying the exact duration in days. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's fuel crisis due to diesel-petrol shortages and supply chain disruptions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Australia temporarily lowered diesel standards, flashpoint from 61.5 degrees Celsius to 60.5 degrees Celsius, for 6 months to increase supply options from international sources like the US, Canada, and Europe, ABC, Guardian. Hundreds of service stations across Australia are experiencing fuel shortages, with at least 164 NSW stations without diesel and 289 without at least one fuel type, ABC, Guardian. Energy Minister Chris Bowen released 20% of Australia's fuel reserve to address shortages, ABC. 6 fuel shipments scheduled for April were cancelled, with some replaced by alternate sources, ABC. In Queensland, 55 stations lack diesel and 35 lack unleaded petrol, ABC, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports 164 NSW stations lack diesel and 289 lack at least one fuel type out of 400+ locations, while Guardian states 105 NSW stations lack diesel, no total fuel shortage count provided. ABC states 6 April shipments were cancelled with some replaced, but Guardian does not specify replacement details or timing for cancellations. Guardian claims Australia has only 3 weeks of certain fuel imports left, while ABC does not provide a specific timeline for remaining imports. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Childcare worker convicted of indecent treatment of child, not guilty of rape, sentenced to 20 months imprisonment. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Arvinder J. Singh, a 43-year-old Fiji citizen, was found guilty of indecent treatment of a child under his care in Maroochydore District Court. Singh was not guilty of the charge of digitally raping the child, as determined by a jury after a 3-day trial with 10 witnesses. Singh was sentenced to 20 months imprisonment, with 10 months suspended and the remainder served before deportation to Fiji. The victim was a child in Singh's care at a Sunshine Coast childcare centre in 2022. Singh's visa was cancelled after being charged with rape in 2022, but he remained in Australia until deported to Fiji in July 2025. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Singh was deported in July 2025 and then voluntarily returned in February 2026, while Article 2 does not mention the July 2025 deportation explicitly. Article 1 mentions Singh spent a month in immigration detention in May 2025 before deportation, but this detail is not repeated in Article 2. Article 1 specifies Singh's deportation costs were not funded, but Article 2 does not address this issue. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump's perceived hubris and misjudgments in the US-led Iran conflict. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump reportedly predicted the US-Israeli assault on Iran would conclude in 4 days, according to Asli Aden Tasbaz of Brookings Institution, both sources. A classified National Intelligence Council report warned that a large-scale US assault on Iran would be unlikely to oust the Islamic Republic's military and clerical establishment, both sources. Iran launched thousands of missiles and drones at Arab neighbors in the Gulf and attacked Israel during the conflict, both sources. Trump acknowledged the risk of Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz but claimed Tehran would likely capitulate before doing so, both sources. Iran's navy was significantly larger than Trump expected, and he expressed surprise at its size, both sources. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources as they are nearly identical in content and phrasing. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Victorian government finalises planning reforms for 20-storey towers in Melbourne's activity zones. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Victorian government finalised planning controls for 25 of 60 activity centres around transport hubs in Melbourne, including Coburg, Brunswick, Middle Brighton, Oakley, Kew Junction, Brighton, Hawthorn, West Footscray, Heidelberg, and Thornbury. Height limits in parts of Brunswick and Coburg's activity centres increased from 16 to 20 stories, while Middle Brighton's limits remain between 12 and 16 stories, with core areas at 12 stories. The government received feedback from over 12,500 Victorians that shaped the final plans, including changes to height limits and greener streetscapes. Buildings meeting planning rules in core activity centre zones are deemed to comply, meaning they cannot be sent to VCAT and councils must approve them. Opposition leader Jess Wilson has vowed to scrap the state-mandated activity centres if the coalition wins the November election, instead promising to return powers to local councils. But not all outlets told the same story. The Age states height limits in core areas of activity centres can reach up to 50 stories in suburban rail loop hubs like Box Hill, while ABC does not mention this specific height limit. The Age reports that planning controls for 35 of 60 targeted precincts are now finalised and expected to take effect within months, but ABC does not mention this timeline or number of precincts. The Age claims the government's activity centres will unlock capacity for more than 300,000 homes by 2051, while ABC does not explicitly state this number but references the same 300,000 target in a different phrasing. This story was covered by ABC News and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 4 Jewish ambulances set ablaze in London anti-Semitic hate crime attack. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 4 ambulances belonging to Hatzolah, Jewish Community Ambulance Service, were set on fire in Golders Green, London, around 1:45 a.m. local time on Monday. Police are treating the incident as a suspected anti-Semitic hate crime with 3 suspects at large, none arrested yet. Explosions were caused by gas canisters, oxygen tanks, on the ambulances, not bombs, with windows broken in adjacent flats. 6 London Fire Brigade fire engines and 40 firefighters attended the scene. The fire was brought under control by 3:06 a.m. with no injuries reported. Nearby houses were evacuated as a precaution, and roads were closed during the incident. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Article 4, connects the attack to broader geopolitical tensions and war narratives, while other sources focus solely on the local anti-Semitic hate crime without political context. ABC describes footage showing 3 hooded individuals pouring gasoline, but this detail is not mentioned in other sources. The Guardian, Article 6, highlights local residents' anger at UK political actions intensifying anti-Semitism, a claim not echoed in other articles. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump criticizes Australia and NATO allies for refusing military aid in Iran conflict. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump publicly stated on social media that the US no longer needs or desires NATO countries' assistance in the Iran war, writing, "We do not need the help of anyone." Mentioned in Articles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Australia's Transport Minister Catherine King confirmed Australia would not send a ship to the Strait of Hormuz, Articles 3, 4, 5. Iran has effectively blockaded the Strait of Hormuz since the US-Israel strikes in February, causing global oil supply disruptions and fuel price surges, Articles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The International Energy Agency warned the Iran conflict is the greatest threat to global energy supply in history of the world, Article 1. Donald Trump previously called on allies, including Japan, South Korea, and NATO, to send warships to the Strait of Hormuz but received refusals, Articles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Article 1, reports Trump said he was very surprised Australia declined to send troops, but no other source confirms this exact phrasing or context. The Guardian, Article 1, states Trump did not answer when asked what Australia had said no to, while The Age, Article 2, does not mention this unanswered question. The Guardian, Article 4, reports Chalmers said Australia has made the nature of our commitment clear regarding the Strait of Hormuz, but The Age, Article 2, does not quote Chalmers on this. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. ABC staff strike over rejected pay deal and unresolved union demands. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. More than 75% of ABC staff, 75% of total workforce, will walk off the job on Wednesday for 24 hours, the first strike in 20 years. The draft enterprise agreement offered a 10% total pay rise over 3 years, 3.5% in year 1, 3.25% in years 2 and 3, with a one-off $1,000 payment excluded for casual staff. 60% of ABC staff, both journalists and non-journalists, voted no on Sunday to the revised enterprise agreement. Unions, MEAA and CPSU, rejected the offer due to concerns over staff appraisal process, career progression, night shift penalty rates, and reproductive health leave. The strike begins at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, with severe disruption expected to ABC's news services including the primetime current affairs show 7.30. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states 60% of ABC staff voted no to the revised agreement, while news.com.au does not provide a specific percentage of votes against the offer. The Guardian mentions the 2022-23 annual report estimating ABC's audience reach at 65% of Australia's population, but news.com.au does not reference this data. The Guardian includes a quote from Paige Cockburn about temporary contracts and management bonuses, which is not present in news.com.au. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Victorian public school teachers staging first strike in 13 years over pay dispute. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australian Education Union, AEU, is leading a 24-hour strike on March 24, 2025, involving tens of thousands of Victorian public school teachers, principals, and support staff. The strike was approved by the Fair Work Commission after 98% of AEU members voted in favour, citing low pay and excessive workloads as key issues. The government's proposed pay deal is an 18% offer over 4 years, 8% in April 2025, followed by 3% annual rises, which the AEU rejected as totally unacceptable or completely unacceptable. The AEU is seeking a 35% pay rise over 4 years for teachers, with additional demands for reduced workloads and improved mental health support. Premier Jacinta Allen has urged teachers to abandon the strike, stating it would disrupt families and that schools would remain open with casual and retired teachers covering classes. But not all outlets told the same story. The Age states the government's offer was made a week ago, 9 months after negotiations began, while ABC and Guardian imply the offer was made closer to the strike date without specifying the exact timeline. The Age reports the government's offer is 18%, while ABC and Guardian refer to it as 18.5%, including a 1.5% overtime allowance. The Age claims the strike is the first in 13 years, while ABC and Guardian state it is the first in 13 years but specify 2012 or 2013 as the last strike year, slight discrepancy in exact year. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's economic risks from US-Iran tensions and domestic policy fallout. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Barry Cassidy and Tony Barry discuss the fuel crisis in Australia linked to potential economic fallout from a US-Iran war. The Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, has raised the cash rate. Treasurer Jim Chalmers is described as opening the door for a possible recession. Liberal MP Andrew Hastie criticizes US President Trump's stance on Iran. The Albanese government faces public blame for economic fallout from Trump's policies. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Liberal MP Andrew Hastie's criticism of the US president, while Article 2 adds and distancing from Trump's stance. No contradictions in factual claims beyond phrasing differences, all core details align. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Trump orders ICE agents to US airports amid DHS shutdown and TSA staff shortages. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump threatened to deploy ICE agents to US airports on Monday, the 24th of March, 2026, if Democrats did not agree to fund DHS, per Guardian, X2, ABC, X2, and ABC, X3. Over 400 TSA workers have quit since the partial government shutdown began on the 14th of February, 2026, per Guardian, X2, ABC, X2, and ABC, X3. TSA personnel are set to miss their second full paycheck on the 27th of March, 2026 due to the partial shutdown, per Guardian, X2, and ABC, X2. The partial government shutdown over DHS funding entered its 36th day by the 20th of March, 2026, per Guardian, X2, and ABC, X2. ICE agents are not specifically trained for airport security, which is TSA's domain, per Guardian, X2, ABC, X2, and ABC, X3. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1, Guardian, states Trump's post said ICE agents would do security like no one has ever seen before, while Article 5, Guardian, clarifies Homan said ICE would only guard exits and check IDs, not perform full security duties. Article 1, Guardian, does not mention ICE agents being deployed immediately, while Article 5, Guardian, confirms deployment began on Monday, the 24th of March, 2026. Article 2, ABC, states ICE agents would guard exit lanes or check passenger IDs, but Article 3, Guardian, does not specify these exact roles, only mentioning security broadly. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Hong Kong's 2023 Wang Fuck Court Fire Inquiry and Investigations. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The fire occurred at Wang Fuk Court, a high-rise apartment complex in Hong Kong's Tai Po district, on the 26th of November, 2023. The blaze killed 168 people, making it the world's deadliest residential building fire since 1980 and Hong Kong's deadliest in decades. 7 out of 8 residential towers in the complex were engulfed by the fire, which spread rapidly due to bamboo scaffolding, protective netting, and foam boards. The complex was undergoing renovations at the time of the fire. Police have arrested 38 people on suspicion of manslaughter and 6 on suspicion of fraud. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources on core factual claims. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Leadership crisis and potential spill in Victorian Labor Party ahead of 2024 election. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jacinta Allan is Victorian Premier and faces leadership spill speculation ahead of the November 2024 state election. Her net approval rating is -37%, Demos AU poll in Herald Sun, and 69% of coalition voters would direct preferences to One Nation over Labour, Redbridge survey for Australian Financial Review. Deputy Premier Ben Carroll, right faction, and Transport Infrastructure Minister Gabrielle Williams, left faction, are the most likely leadership contenders. Allan became Victorian Premier in September 2023 after succeeding Daniel Andrews. Labour's 2023 state election result was better than expected, temporarily easing leadership pressure on Allan. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports a grouping of socialist left MPs within the southeast are driving the push for a leadership change, but these MPs deny it. The Age says a factional chief offered the view that anyone other than Allan would lead the party to a better result, while ABC states no one has suggested anyone was counting numbers. The Guardian claims a push for a leadership change is underway with more than a dozen sources confirming it, but ABC says no one has approached ministers to canvass a change. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Pauline Hanson's One Nation surge benefiting Labour in Australian elections via electoral system dynamics. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Pauline Hanson stated her 20% One Nation vote surge is just the start. One Nation secured 20% of the vote in recent elections, while Labour's 39% vote share remained stable. Liberal Party vote collapsed to 19% as counting progressed. Greens vote increased to 11% in the same election. One Nation finished 4th in metropolitan Adelaide behind Labour, One Nation, and Greens. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Coronial inquest into Bradley Murdoch's death and his refusal to disclose Peter Falconio's remains. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Bradley Murdoch was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2005 for the murder of Peter Falconio and attempted kidnapping of Joanne Lees, with a non-parole period of 28 years. Murdoch died from stage 4 cancer, throat cancer, in Alice Springs Hospital's palliative care unit on July 16, 2025, after 22 years in prison. Police made 2 attempts to convince Murdoch to reveal Falconio's remains in the weeks before his death, one visit to the prison on June 25, 2025, and another brief visit to his palliative care bed. Murdoch refused to watch a video of Falconio's parents shown by police during the June 25 visit and yelled at police to get out during the July visit. A $500,000 reward remains for information leading to Falconio's remains, which have never been found. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Murdoch's cancer was diagnosed in November 2024 after a neck lump complaint, while The Guardian does not specify the exact diagnosis timeline. ABC highlights occasional delays in medical treatment were acknowledged but no missed opportunity for earlier diagnosis, while The Guardian focuses on Murdoch's verbal abuse of staff and refusal of radiotherapy. The Guardian describes Murdoch's final interaction with police as yelling "Get out" at his bedside, while ABC does not mention this specific phrase but notes a 30-second visit. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. A real possum was found among plush toys in a Hobart Airport gift shop. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A real possum was found nestled among stuffed animals in the gift shop at Hobart Airport on Wednesday morning. The possum appeared calm when first discovered but caused pandemonium when it left the shop and wandered the departure lounge. Liam Bloomfield, multi-site manager with Lagardère AWPL at Hobart Airport, confirmed the incident and described the possum as not stressed initially. The possum was safely escorted out of the terminal by airport management without incident. The incident occurred around 11:45 a.m. on Wednesday. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC describes the possum as appeared calm but then took a walk outside the shop, which caused pandemonium, while The Guardian does not specify the possum's behavior after leaving the shop. ABC mentions redevelopment works as a possible explanation for the possum's entry, but The Guardian does not mention this detail. The Guardian highlights staff and passengers being delighted, while ABC focuses more on the logistical challenge of managing the situation. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Coroner's inquest into influencers' free birth death and birthkeepers' refusal to testify. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Stacey Warner-Key, 30, died from a postpartum hemorrhage and cardiac arrest after a free birth at home in Melbourne on September 29, 2025. Emily Lau, known as the authentic birthkeeper, was present during Stacey Warner-Key's home birth and when 000 was called. A coroner's inquest into Warner-Key's death is proposed for mid-June 2026, examining whether earlier medical intervention could have saved her. Emily Lau has refused to provide a statement to the coroner's investigation, citing privilege against self-incrimination. Victoria's Health Complaints Commissioner issued an interim ban on Emily Lau from providing general health services in October 2025, pending investigation. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the inquest may take place in mid-June 2026 without specifying exact dates, while Newscomau specifies June 15 to 19, 2026. ABC mentions the case was adjourned until June 2026, but Newscomau does not reference an adjournment date. ABC reports the Health Complaints Commissioner's ban expires on April 7, 2026, but Newscomau does not specify an exact expiry date. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Death of martial arts legend and actor Chuck Norris at 86. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Chuck Norris died aged 86 after hospitalization in Hawaii on Thursday, with family keeping details private. Born Carlos Ray Norris on March 19, 1940, in Ryan, Oklahoma. Joined the U.S. Air Force in 1958 and trained in martial arts during deployment to South Korea in the 1950s. Six-time undefeated world professional middleweight karate champion, retired in 1974. Founded his own martial arts style, Chun Kuk Do, awarding over 3,300 black belts worldwide. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Article 1 describes Norris's physique in The Way of the Dragon as bulky with an ounce or two of old-fashioned fat, while Guardian Article 3 omits this detail and focuses on his humility and serenity. ABC mentions Norris's 2006 visit to Iraq shaking hands with a U.S. Marine, but this is not referenced in any other source. Guardian Article 3 states Norris's 1985 Daily Mail headline was the real Rambo, while Guardian Article 1 does not mention this specific headline. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia approves massive coal seam gas expansion in Queensland until 2081. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The federal government approved a coal seam gas expansion project, Australia Pacific LNG, in Queensland's Surat and Bowen basins until 2081. The project includes up to 1,695 new gas wells, 1,545 kilometers of gas and water pipelines, and 3 processing facilities. The project is expected to produce about 2,033 petajoules of gas and operate until 2061, with an extension to 2081 for environmental compliance. The project's public environment report estimated 9 million tons of CO2 emissions during construction and operation, plus 111 million tons from burning the gas. Australia Pacific LNG is a joint venture of ConocoPhillips, Origin Energy, and Sinopec. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports 126 environmental conditions, while ABC reports 120 conditions. The Guardian highlights 111 tons of emissions from burning gas as exceeding Australia's annual transport emissions, but ABC does not emphasise this comparison. The Guardian quotes Amanda Mackenzie's cigarette analogy, while ABC does not include this metaphor. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia and EU sign long-awaited free trade and security partnership after 8 years of negotiations. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement was signed on Tuesday after 8 years of negotiations, with leaders Anthony Albanese and Ursula von der Leyen finalising terms at Parliament House in Canberra. The deal is expected to create an annual economic benefit of $10 billion for Australia, lowering trade barriers between Australia and a market of 450 million EU consumers. The agreement includes a 30,000-tonne annual tariff-free quota for Australian beef exports to the EU, a 500% increase from current levels. The EU dropped demands for Australia to scrap its luxury car tax entirely, instead reaching a compromise on the tax. The Australia-EU Security and Defence Partnership was also finalised, focusing on defence industry cooperation, cybersecurity, and counter-terrorism. But not all outlets told the same story. The ABC states the EU's beef quota is well short of the 50,000 tonnes demanded by the NFF, while Newscomau describes it as at best, a few 10,000 tonnes more than current levels, with no explicit mention of 50,000 tonnes. The ABC reports the EU's beef quota is 30,000 tonnes annually, but Newscomau does not explicitly state this number, only that it is less than the 40,000 to 50,000 tonnes industry is demanding. The ABC mentions the EU's beef quota was influenced by political concerns from EU member nations due to the EU-Mercosur deal, a detail not included in Newscomau. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian Muslims celebrate Eid and Nowruz amid war fears and rising Islamophobia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Eid al-Fitr and Nowruz celebrations are taking place in Australia this weekend, 2024 dates implied. Heidelberg Mosque in Melbourne expected 1,500 worshippers for Eid prayers on Friday morning. Lokemba Mosque in Sydney anticipates 50,000 attendees for Eid prayers, requiring heightened security. Security at mosques has been increased due to concerns about Islamophobic incidents and potential threats. The 7th anniversary of the Christchurch Massacre, 2019, is being remembered during Eid. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions Lokemba Mosque security levels are not required since the 2005 Cronulla riots, but SBS does not reference this comparison. The Guardian provides specific quotes about political Islamophobia, e.g., Gamal Kir's criticism of politicians, while SBS omits these details. The Guardian details the emotional and practical impacts of war on families, e.g., relatives stuck overseas, Lebanon strikes, but SBS does not elaborate on these specifics. This story was covered by The Guardian and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-Iran escalation over Strait of Hormuz and energy infrastructure threats in Middle East war. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump gave Iran a 48-hour deadline, until 23:44 Greenwich Mean Time on March 25, to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz without threat, or face US strikes on Iran's power plants, posting on Truth Social on March 24, 2026. Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf stated that if Iran's power plants and infrastructure are targeted, vital infrastructure as well as energy and oil infrastructure across the entire region will be considered legitimate targets and will be irreversibly destroyed, according to statements on March 24 to 25, 2026. Iran's Military Operational Command Qatem al-Anbiya warned that if the US targets Iran's power plants, the Strait of Hormuz will be completely closed and will not reopen until Iran's destroyed power plants are rebuilt, as reported on March 24 to 25, 2026. Iran's missiles struck southern Israeli cities Dimona and Orod on March 24 to 25, injuring approximately 200 people, including children, and damaging buildings, with Israeli air defenses failing to intercept some strikes, confirmed by multiple sources. The Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed to vessels linked to Iran's enemies, US and Israel, as per Ali Mousavi, Iran's representative to the International Maritime Organization, on March 24 to 25, 2026. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Steve Reed, denied Iran was targeting Europe, stating he was not aware of any assessment that Iran intended to strike European capitals, while the Israeli military chief Eyal Zami claimed Iran's missiles had a range reaching Berlin, Paris, or Berlin, implying a direct threat to Europe. ABC reported that Lebanese President Joseph Aoun accused Israel of laying the groundwork for an invasion in Lebanon's south, while Israel's military stated it was targeting Hezbollah infrastructure to contain the threat in the south and eliminate it, framing the strikes as defensive rather than preparatory for an invasion. The Guardian, Steve Reed, stated Trump was speaking for himself when threatening to obliterate Iran's power plants, while other sources, e.g., Newskamau, SMH, presented the threat as an official US administration stance without qualifying it as Trump's personal opinion. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Italian PM Giorgia Meloni faces referendum defeat on judiciary reform. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Giorgia Meloni's government proposed a referendum to reform Italy's judiciary, separating judges and prosecutors and altering the Superior Council of the Judiciary, CSM. The referendum was held over 2 days, Sunday through Monday, with 53.8 to 54% of voters rejecting the reform and 46 to 46.2% supporting it. Turnout reached a record 58.5%, Guardian, or nearly 59%, ABC, higher than expected forecasts. Giorgia Meloni acknowledged defeat, stating the Italians have decided and pledged to move forward with responsibility and respect. The referendum campaign featured inflammatory rhetoric from Meloni and her ministers against the judiciary, framing it as a political issue. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports turnout at 58.5%, Interior Ministry data, while ABC states it was nearly 59%, no official source cited. The Guardian specifies 53.8% voted no, Opinio Rai data, but ABC rounds to almost 54% without citing the exact source. The Guardian attributes the 61% no vote among 18 to 34-year-olds to Opinio Rai data, while ABC does not mention youth turnout breakdowns. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media fact-checker. Iranian women's football team returns home after asylum drama in Australia amid war fears. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 7 members of Iran's women's national football team initially sought asylum in Australia on March 10, 2024, after the team's silence during the national anthem at the Women's Asian Cup. 5 players and 1 staff member later withdrew their asylum claims and returned to Iran via Malaysia, Oman, and Turkey, arriving in early April 2024. 2 players, Fatma Pasandadeh and Atfef Ramazanisadeh, remained in Australia and are training with Brisbane Roar without hijabs. Iranian state media reported the team was greeted at the border by officials and later held a welcome ceremony in Valia Square, Tehran. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf stated the players disappointed the enemies and did not surrender to deception in a social media post. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the team arrived in Australia for the tournament shortly before Iran's war began on February 28, while The Guardian and News.com.au do not specify this exact timing. The Guardian reports Iranian authorities accused Australia of pressuring the players to stay, but ABC does not mention this direct accusation from Iran. News.com.au claims Iranian state media filmed the players parading over the Israeli flag with floral wreaths, a detail not mentioned in ABC or The Guardian. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and News.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. BHP and Woodside Energy announce new CEOs amid leadership transitions and corporate milestones. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Brandon Craig will become BHP's chief executive and director from July 1, 2025, succeeding Mike Henry. Brandon Craig previously served as BHP America's president and led the company's iron ore operations in Western Australia. BHP's market value makes it one of Australia's biggest companies by market capitalisation. Mike Henry's tenure as BHP CEO lasted 6.5 years, since 2020, and oversaw BHP becoming the world's largest copper producer. Elizabeth Westcott was appointed Woodside Energy's permanent CEO and managing director in 2025, succeeding Meg O'Neill. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the sources. This story was covered by ABC News and News.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Death of married at first sight expert Mel Schilling at age 54 from colon cancer. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Mel Schilling died on Tuesday at age 54. Schilling was diagnosed with colon cancer in December 2023. Her cancer spread to the left side of her brain in March 2024. Doctors told Schilling in March 2024 that there was nothing further they can do to treat her cancer. Schilling underwent 16 rounds of chemotherapy followed by radiotherapy during filming for Married at First Sight. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC does not mention the phrase "peacefully today," surrounded by love in the family statement, while The Guardian includes it. The Guardian's headline includes Melanie Jane Brisbane Schilling as her full name, while ABC does not use this full name. ABC's headline does not include the phrase "passed away peacefully" used by The Guardian. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Severe flash flooding and dam failure risks in Hawaii's northern Oahu and Maui due to extreme rainfall. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Thousands of residents, over 4,000 to 5,500, were ordered to evacuate in northern Oahu, including Waialua and Halewa, due to flooding and dam risks. The Waihioa Dam on Oahu, built in 1903, is at risk of imminent failure with water actively running over its spillway at 1,500 gallons per second, reported by Guardian and ABC. Emergency sirens and leave now evacuation orders were issued for areas downstream of the Waihioa Dam on Friday morning, April 12, 2024. A shelter at Waialua High and Intermediate School, with 185 people and 50 pets, was evacuated due to flooding and later relocated. Heavy rainfall, 200 to 300 mm overnight on Oahu, 400 mm at Kala Peak, saturated the ground after a prior storm dumped 670 mm between March 10 to 16, 2024. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Article 1 reports evacuation orders for 4,000+ people, while Guardian Article 3 later states 5,500 people were under evacuation orders. ABC states Maui County issued an asterisk evacuation advisory asterisk, not warning, for Lahaina, but Guardian Article 3 calls it an asterisk evacuation warning star. Guardian Article 1 mentions a shelter at Waialua High lost power and was evacuated itself, while ABC does not mention power loss at the shelter. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Former Liberal staffer Bruce Lehrmann faces Queensland rape trial in November 2024. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Bruce Lehrmann, 30, is charged with 2 counts of rape alleged to have occurred in Toowoomba in October 2021. The trial is scheduled to begin on November 2, 2024, in the Toowoomba District Court. Judge Deborah Richards set the trial date during a court mention on July 2024. Lehrmann has not yet formally entered a plea but has previously indicated he would plead not guilty. Defense lawyer Zali Burrows is representing Lehrmann and has not yet decided whether the case will proceed before a judge or jury. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC mentions Lehrmann was a former Liberal staffer based in Canberra, while Newskamau only states he was a Canberra-based staffer without specifying former. No contradictions in trial date, charges, or key figures, both sources align on core facts. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.